Hello. I hope you're doing well today and having a lovely weekend. We're going to be drawing the first in what I assume to be is a long line of large Pokemon-sized cards. I've floated the idea around for a while for how I wanted to have multiple Pokemon, whether that be multiple versions of the same Pokemon, i.e. the different regional forms of Meowth, or scenes where multiple Pokemon could be fighting or interacting in general, like box legendaries, or in today's example, a full line of Pokemon. So I want to draw a little scene for the wooper line, including the Paldea forms as suggested by you lovely people.
So yeah, let's get into it.
So as we get into this, I'll show you the things I'm using in case it helps anyone. So the pencil that I'm using at the minute is pretty old. I can't remember when I actually got them. They've been sat in a cupboard for God knows how long. But you also don't need fancy pencils, expensive sketchbooks. You know, in my eyes, all you need is a pencil, some paper, and the will to have fun. So I'm using a jumbo Pokemon card to get the size I want. And the main reason I'm doing it is just so I've got the perfect size to stick it in one of those jumbo card binders. As I start getting into this, I think it's a good time for me to talk about what my plans are going forward, what stuff I've got in my head project-wise, what I want for like the long form and short form content to look like. So I did do like a little doodle plan of what I wanted to do and the idea I roughly had in my head. So this is kind of what we're going for, and we'll see what it turns out like. I hope you're ready for me to just absolutely yap your ear off for a bit. So when it comes to the long form content, I'd actually love some input from you about what you want to see. When I started doing this, I was actually irritated at the state of like Pokemon card scalpers, the prices of things, you know, it's gotten astronomical. So I just wanted to make my own. I've said a few times that I've stopped practicing art for about 10 years-ish, so I'm definitely more rusty than I used to be. But drawing a Pokemon every day has helped scratch that Pokemon card itch and practice and improve my art. I'll be honest, I didn't think for a second it would be almost 2 months in, and now over 600 subscribers on YouTube, 300 followers on TikTok. Seeing all the amazing comments, videos, artwork that you've been inspired to do, it's in turn inspired me to want to draw more and more and think of other ideas that I want to do. Not even just necessarily drawing, just creating things. So yeah, long form videos. These I think, at least for the time being, I want them to be a bit more relaxed, more of a chat with a friend. Speaking of which, I hope you're having a good day, hope you're well. Better be drinking some water. Yeah, I got your ass. So I'll be doing some things like getting a sketchbook and doing some sketchbook pages. I want to do some painting again. You know, I want to try some animating and even some like old school animation. You know, when it comes to it, art does take, you know, a long time to do. And I've been drawing at least one Pokemon card a day. But I wouldn't be able to do that if they weren't the size of Pokemon cards. So whilst I have more big videos in mind that will be more edited, you know, hopefully once I get a little bit better at that side of it, stick around until the end for a sneak peek at what I'm going to be doing. You know, a lot of them will be similar to today, where I'm just going to yap for a bit.
Speaking of yapping, let's talk about the actual art for a second. So one of the early requests I had that hasn't left my mind was to have the whole wooper line in like a swamp marsh area, and I really like the idea of having all four of them together. So that's kind of what I've went for. So we've got Quagsire, you know, chilling out on his back, a big old yawning Clodsire, and some little dancing woopers. So obviously when it came to the actual piece, I started out kind of with the horizon line, so I kind of knew where I was putting things, and then started blocking pieces in, basically, just so I had a sense of where I was going with it. Obviously similar to the idea I had in my head that I doodled out before, it kind of gave me a good understanding of where I wanted stuff to be. So you will have to bear with me through the sketching process a little bit. You know, I tweak things here and there and change stuff around. I wanted to try something a little bit different with the trees. And it's important to note that I did look up a lot of references just of like swamps and marshes to kind of get the vibe I was looking for and the kind of aesthetic I wanted. I will be honest, if you compare this to like an actual marsh in real life, it won't look exactly like this. So just pretend it's close enough. But we're just about finished up with the sketching process, so we'll move on to the more vulnerable part of it all, and that's the fine linering. So you see, this for me is an area I still think I need improvement on. This is the fine liner that I use. It's just a generic fine liner. I honestly can't remember where I got it from.
So there are definitely some ideas that I've got in my head that I want to do and explore. I want to set up a website, a place mainly to have like a gallery of art I've done. Even have like a little section for like the Pokédex almost, where we can go through and have a look at each card that we've done, which I think would be a really cool idea. So if you know any good website builders, I ain't a website designer, let me know. Preferably one that would work well with some kind of like print-on-demand service, as that ties into something else I want to talk about. I do want to look at different print-on-demand services, or pod services. For anyone that isn't aware, print-on-demand is just a way for anyone to be able to upload the designs to a site and to be able to customize those designs to fit things like stickers, cups, phone cases. But the thing I'm mostly interested in is like clothing. I basically live in hoodies, and if, a little selfishly, I can design my own hoodies for myself, it would honestly be amazing. That way it also allows the option for you to pick them up if you wanted one. That's the whole point of print on demand. You don't have to get a massive amount of stock of hoodies or whatever. They'll print them if you want them. Like a small idea I had was like some kind of like varsity hoodie, kind of representing the different types or something like that. But yeah, it's something I'm debating. So yeah, let me know if you've ever worked with or ordered from any pod services and what your experiences have been.
But as I mentioned before, I think the fine liner process is definitely the bit I struggle the most with. I think it's just the sheer fact that I can't erase it. There are definitely ways around it. So, for example, the white pen I used for highlights and stuff, acrylic markers, stuff like that, you can get around it, but it is definitely more permanent. So we're going to move on to colouring. This is the colours that I use. They're just some generic alcohol markers. If you're UK based, you can get them from B&M for like 40 quid. These are 160. They have a decent range of colours, and I enjoy using them a lot. It is one of those things where the more you're willing to spend on it, the better it's probably going to look. And in the future, I hope to maybe be in a position where we can try them. For example, a Hulu have some really good ranges. But we'll bring this back in and hopefully start getting some colour added to it. Again, this specific brand is this one. It's like Deco Time Twin Marker, alcohol based. Mainly you just want to make sure that you're getting alcohol markers. If you're, new to art, or you don't know the difference between all the different supplies, don't worry, I still don't. But basically the difference between like your normal water-based markers and alcohol markers is that alcohol markers will blend a lot better than water-based markers. You'll also find that as you start adding more colour to the paper with water-based markers, it kind of starts like tearing up the page a bit, depending on how much you've added. Whereas you can add a decent amount of alcohol marker to a page without it sort of ripping, tearing. Ain't you like that little Doom reference out of nowhere? I think as well as the alcohol markers tend to make things look a bit more vibrant. At least for me personally. Alcohol markers also make really good like base colours. So if you've got multiple art supplies, you're someone that has multiple pens, multiple different pencils, oil pastels, paint, you name it. The alcohol based markers make a really good base coat for that, and being able to apply stuff on top of it. It takes it really well. And I'm just going to start yapping again.
Like I say, we are coming up to 2 months now, and I really like the idea of having like a magazine every couple of months or so. I'm still working on the timing of it, but I think it's a really cute idea of being able to show updates and shout outs and just interact with you even more. So I like the idea of drawing like a little city expanding as the platform grows, like a little village. So we could have like a little section for the amount of like Pokemon cards that we've drawn, you know, like a little stocks increasing type thing. Some like little teasers of what's to come. So for example, like the Hollow Knight one in the last one, which is still coming. You know, art does take time. You know, I also want to stick in shout outs if you were comfortable with that, because I've honest to God been in tears seeing all the amazing art, seeing stories about you starting to draw again. You know, I've seen some truly outstanding art, including but not limited to like embroidered Pokemon cards, painted cards, drawings, realistic renderings. I could go on and on, but it's been unbelievable to watch. Just amazing art. And hearing stories about you fall back in love with drawing again, like I have been doing for the last 2 months. You know, I'm a soppy guy. I'm not gonna lie. Don't take much to bring me to tears, but here we are.
So again, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Honest to God, I can't thank you all enough. But enough of that anyway. Go get the last bits of colour added in. You know, fill in the sky, fill in the bits and pieces before we start bringing out, like, you know, the highlights and the shadows. You know, I have a lot of other ideas for what I want the next kind of big card to be. But let me know what you think would make a good card. But, you know, other than Pokemon, there are other interests that I have. I enjoy gaming quite a lot. I tend to lean more towards the hard games, you know, like Hollow Knight, for example. You may have noticed the Dark Souls tattoo. But we're just about wrapped up with the colouring aspect of it, so we're going to add in the highlights. So this is the pen that I use for the white highlights that I do on pretty much every single piece I do. It's a white Posca marker, basically just an acrylic pen. It's basically paint, so you've got to shake it before you use it. So if you're someone that's got acrylic pens and you didn't know that, yeah, make sure you're shaking your pens. Now, my process when it comes to kind of highlighting is, so I want to put the highlights in the areas where, like, obviously the light's going to be bouncing off the most. So like the water, the tops of the trees, you know. Ultimately though, have fun. If you really want to be nitpicky, I don't think most of this makes sense. I just think it looks good in the moment, and therefore I think it's good to try. The point is though, I basically never have a plan when going into this. Well, with the highlights at least. The shadows too, for that matter. But we're just about finished with the highlighting. You know, I think this is a good time to make sure that if you are doing art, anything creative yourself, just make sure you're having fun. That's the main thing above all else, and I'll continue to say it forever until people get irritated by me. And we're done with the card. This is basically the final product. We're just going to get it cut out, you know, trim the edges off. Typically I'd like freehand the border for this bit, but with it being so big, I figured a ruler would be best. And here we are, the end of the video. This is basically the part of the video where it is completely unscripted, and
I say unscripted. It's not like the rest of it was very heavily scripted. It would basically had some loose notes. So as well as the Hollow Knight thing that I want to do. If anyone's watched Bill making stuff, I'm like a massive fan, and he does this big bot bash thing where you kind of scratch build a robot. I'll stick a picture of it here. But basically you roll a d20 and you get some prompts of what your robot basically should be. I did it last year, basically. It was just a fun thing to do in my spare time. Here he is, and I want to do it again this year, so I'm going to do that and I'll let you know how it goes. I will say his arm's fallen off, but don't worry about that. But yeah, look forward to that. I hope you've enjoyed, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.